All right, hello and welcome into KBO Chats Live. I'm Sam Pasco alongside Erik, Halterman, and we are breaking down everything you need to know in the KBO tonight/tomorrow morning, depending on where you're joining us in the world. Before we begin, got to shout out the site rotowire.com/free KBO. That is where we are checking out the lineups, standings, and so much more. Head over there and follow us on Twitter at Rotowire KBO. All right, starting first with the standings as we normally do. We are looking at the 7-team race according to run margin. I know you like that. We got the green over here, still 7 teams in the green. But when we look at that top 3, the KT Wiz, the LG Twins, and the SSG Landers, I wanted to mention the Wiz and the Twins have made a couple of moves in terms of their foreign bats. Erik, you want to update the fans on what's going on there with Jared Hoying and Justin Bohr?
Yeah, we got a couple departures from the two best teams. These two best teams doing it without much from their foreign hitters, which I think bodes really well for them down the stretch. If you've got everything else going right, and then you add in theoretically one of the best bats on your team in the second half, that's great news. These guys aren't going to show up probably for at least a month or so, but the Wiz dropped Zoilo Almonte. He was dealing with an Achilles issue. He was hitting fine, but nothing special. OPS of like 740, I believe, and was going to miss some time. And rather than wait for him, they brought back Jared Hoying to the KBO. He really was very bad last year for the Eagles, but who wasn't? Had just a 577 OPS last season, but he's played in 300 career KBO games, has an 843 OPS in his 30s, but 32, 33, not way over the hill. And in fact, he played in an MLB game or 3 for the Blue Jays earlier this year, so should be fine enough. I don't think he'll necessarily be a whole lot worse than what they got from Almonte, which was, not quite what you want. And then for the Twins, similar story. Roberto Ramos, who I think was maybe the player that got American fans or North American fans at large most excited for much of the KBO season last year. Really had that home run surge early in the year. Looked like he might win an MVP, come back and be a major league regular. Not going well for him this year. Was not hitting well at all. 739 OPS, which actually was better than what it was for much of the season. But he's been out for 3 weeks with a back issue and evidently was going to miss enough more time. Twins didn't feel like they needed to wait him out. So they're bringing in Justin Bohr instead. Yet another former Philly there for me to follow. Unsurprisingly, I think, given that team's records over the last 8 years or so, you see a lot of guys who spent brief periods with the Phillies now playing overseas. Bohr has a better track record, I think, than almost any foreign hitter that I can think of off the top of my head. Not an elite hitter ever at the MLB level, but he had a year or two where he was actually quite good, and then several years where he was at least passable, at least Ryan Healy level. So I think pretty decent chance he does something.
Indeed. So we got 2 new bats in the KBO joining at some point later this summer. Jared Hoying to the KT Wiz, Justin Bohr to the LG Twins. Should mention Justin Bohr was most recently a Sacramento River Cat with the San Francisco Giants AAA team. We got to shout out Bohr and them there. All right, moving over to the daily lineups now, breaking down the NC Dinos Kia Tigers game, everything you need to know to make a lineup or bet on this game. So we're first starting with the Dinos starter. Actually, before we begin with that, should mention that game 2 was rained out in the series, but NC won game 1 7-3. The Dinos are sending Myungjin Song to the mound. Tonight, he has an ERA over 5, but a 2.77 ERA in June, 4 straight Ws. 20 Ks versus 6 walks in June. Seems like he's doing pretty well recently.
Yeah, there's definitely something here with Myungjin Song. He was the 7th overall pick in 2019 draft. Didn't really do anything that year. But as a swingman last season, 3.70 ERA, 1.33 whip is pretty promising. This year, the surface numbers are pretty bad, 5.26 ERA, 1.51 whip. But strikeout and walk ratios, both pretty good. 20.3% strikeout rate is about 2 ticks above league average. 7.3% walk rate is actually about 4 ticks below league average. Walk rate in the KBO has jumped up to just over 11% this year. So those things are pretty promising. Although if you look at the shape of his season, maybe not. 3.50 ERA and 4 starts before getting hurt. And then since he came back from the injury, 6.17 ERA with a lot fewer strikeouts as well. Although most of that was just in his first 2 starts back. So if you look over his last 4, things look much more optimistic. So there's a few different ways you could spin this. I think on the whole, there's enough to say that if he has a good day, I wouldn't be at all surprised, especially against the lineup as weak as the Tigers, which they've just got nothing. I mean, they only have one regular on the Tigers, has an OPS better than 725. League average OPS is 750 this season. So they only have one guy who's even close to league average. So it doesn't take much to get the job done against them these days.
Yeah, that Kia Tigers offense is abysmal. They are 10th in runs per game scored. We'll talk about the offense in a moment, but before we do, let's talk about Aaron Brooks, the Tigers starter today. You worried about Brooks at all? I mean, he's coming back from injury, ERA near 4 since the beginning of May, and 31 strikeouts, 9 walks is pretty good, but he is facing the Dinos here, who he got roughed up against in the beginning of April to the tune of 7 earned runs in just a tick over 4 innings and 10 hits. Are we worried about Brooks here against the Dinos?
Yeah, I think this is a case where the injury might, or his first couple starts back from injury, I think is going to clarify things. He is having a down year. Despite that 3.52 ERA, his strikeout rate has sunk by nearly 7 points. So last year he did everything. I think he was clear top 5 pitcher. He was one of about 5 guys where you could make a case that they were the best pitcher in the entire league. Probably him, Dan Straley, Erik Jokic, Raul Alcantara, and Chris Flexen, I think, are probably the short list of guys last season that you would have said had a case for best pitcher. Maybe I'm forgetting 1 or 2, but he was definitely that. Like, that's how good he was, and he's decidedly not that this year. Strikeout rate down from 22.2% all the way to 15.3%, significantly below league average, and that means a lot more contact. So his WHIP has gone up from just above 1 to just below 150. ERA up just over a run as well, and probably could be more given how high that WHIP is. But maybe that was all this arm issue. I mean, sometimes an injury can be almost good news in a way. You don't want a guy getting hurt, but you don't mind learning that a guy was hurt because at least provides an explanation for why he wasn't himself. Of course, he may still not be himself. There may be something beyond just the injury. But if he goes out and has a vintage Brooks performance against the Dinos, especially watch that velocity, which was down about 0.8 miles per hour from what it was last season. If that velocity is back up and he has a normal day, I think we can be pretty confident in a return to form, and we can say the injury was the reason why he's having a subpar year. But, it is still the Dinos. They can give anybody trouble. And I think it's very possible that he is not at his best. And then I think we get quite worried.
Yeah, definitely not an easy matchup, especially if he is still a little hurt. The Dinos rank first in runs per game in the entire KBO. Kia, like I mentioned before, they are dead last in 10th. They are just 1-9 over their last 10. They are on a 5-game losing streak. The last time they scored more than 6 runs was back on June 9th, and we're basically now into July. So it's been a while since they put up a big offensive showing. What are we looking at in terms of the offense here? Anything notable for building a lineup here? We pretty much just enjoy avoiding all the Tigers.
Yeah, I'm pretty much at a point where I just don't recommend Tigers. Normally, I try to recommend at least one player from every team who's facing a bad pitcher, but there's been a few times recently where I couldn't even find one that I could in good conscience recommend for the Tigers. Preston Tucker was bad. He's now demoted still. It's really actually quite a theme. A lot of foreign hitters this season are subpar or already gone. Tucker, not going to be in the lineup. Hyungwoo Choi was excellent last season, terrible this year, and injured twice. Still currently injured. There's just nothing. I think it's Wonjun Choi is the only guy with a above average OPS among their starters, and his isn't anything special. 770 something, and he's, I think, overpriced on DraftKings. So pretty much never look their way, even against a pitcher who I think is at best medium in Myung-Gi Song.
Yeah, not looking too good for their offense here. Moving now into the pick. The total is set pretty low here at 9 runs with the Dinos as the favorite. Where are we going to go with the pick, Erik?
Let's go with the under. So this both pitchers again have pretty wide variance today. I'm going to go under, and I'm going to pick the Dinos. So that's a pick, assuming that Aaron Brooks is not going to get blown up, but he's not going to hold the Dinos scoreless. And Myung-Gi Song, I think, is going to have a pretty good game, mostly because the Tigers are just that bad. I mean, if you look at the standings and sort by runs scored, there's two teams, the Tigers and Eagles, just so far beyond everybody else. And I think at this point, you pretty much are happy with any pitcher almost going against those two. So even though Brooks is better than Song, the gap is smaller than it was last year, given that Brooks isn't himself, and that the gap is smaller than, I think, the massive gap between the two lineups.
Yeah, at times last year, this would have been a must-see game with Brooks against the Dinos, but this year, not quite so. Moving on over to the Doosan Bears Hanwha Eagles game. Doosan won game 1, which actually snapped a 4-game losing streak. They won that game 8-6 in a pretty high-scoring affair. Starting with Miranda for the Bears. You mentioned Flexen earlier, and you mentioned Alcantara. They're both out of the Bears. They're no longer on the Bears, and now they got Miranda in there, who's doing a pretty good impression of them, if I might say, over their past couple starts here. Miranda had a great June, a 2.29 ERA, 38 strikeouts against just 7 walks, and is pretty consistent in terms of how deep he goes into games, going exactly 7 or almost exactly 7 in 5 straight starts. Pretty crazy for the starter here with that type of consistency. What do you make of Miranda today against the Hanwha Eagles?
Yeah, I think Miranda's great. I think that the Bears have yet another good one. They seem to have a habit of selecting the best possible forward starters, and I think it's him and Andrew Suarez, unless I'm forgetting somebody, who are the clear 2 top foreign starter signings of the offseason. They obviously Suarez over on the Twins. So those 2 sole teams, I think, did very well for themselves. Miranda early in the season was striking out or walking everybody, but now he's just striking out everybody, which would be what I would recommend if you have to pick between one of the two. Striking out 30.4% of opposing batters easily leads the league. Among pitchers who've thrown at least 60 innings, only 2 other guys are within even 5 percentage points. That's just Wes Parsons and Wilmer Font are the only guys in the same ballpark of his strikeout rate. And his 10.7% walk rate seems high, although it's actually technically slightly below league average this year. And it's inflated by what he did early. In his first 5 starts, he was walking nearly 8 batters per 9 innings, so quite close to a batter per inning. Over his last 9 starts, just 2.5 walks per 9, which is a completely fine number. That ERA dropped from 4.42 over the former stretch to 2.45 over the latter. So with seven or more strikeouts in 7 of his last 8 starts too. There's nobody more consistent right now. Nobody has a higher strikeout ceiling and therefore basically fantasy ceiling. I think he's going to finish easily among the best few starters in the league unless those control problems come back.
Yeah, Miranda's looking great. Should mention though, you see all those great 7 innings, not too many wins, a lot of no decisions. So maybe there's hope for the Eagles. They're sending out Shiwan Zhang for them, an ERA over 5 on the year, but actually pretty good ERA in June, a ERA at 2.6 for the month of June. Still is 0-7 on the season. The biggest concern here is the strikeout to walk ratio, 17 walks against 17 strikeouts, and doesn't go deep into games. 5.1 is the longest on the year. Any hope for the Eagles here? Maybe getting back into some winning ways, or no?
I'll go with no. But there's at least something to Zhang that there wasn't earlier. So early in the season would have given them absolutely no chance. Now I'll give them basically no chance. Last year he had an ERA just over 5, but a strikeout rate of 19.1%. That was slightly above league average. Still a bunch of walks too. But this year, 5.18 ERA is pretty similar. A whip north of 2, though, because his walk rate is all the way up at 17.1%. Has been better in June, as you mentioned. He's gone 5 innings in all 4 June starts, which for him, based on the way the start of the season went, that's an accomplishment. And he has as many strikeouts as walks, which also for him, based on the way the season started, is an accomplishment. In his first 7 outings, 12 strikeouts against 18 walks. So he is getting better, but that 2.61 ERA in June is clearly not deserved when you see it comes with that even strikeout to walk ratio and a 174 whip. So he might be trending towards being a just playable fifth starter after being, the 9th or 10th starter early in the year. But even against a Bears team that is not at its best, Kunwu Park has been demoted for fatigue / maybe also disciplinary reasons. It wasn't entirely clear. And Jaewon Kim is out with a knee injury. So it's definitely a less frightening Bears lineup than it has been in the past, which is part of the reason why they've fallen down to 7th in the standings. That said, it's still more than enough to get the job done against Jong here.
Indeed, want to welcome a couple of the returning viewers in, Barry and Josh. Welcome in, guys. Talking about the offenses
You're
here.
not going to welcome the spam bot that's trying to
spam
sell
bot,
us
of course.
followers?
You've made it when you get that Twitch spam.
Let's go. I do want to be famous. Go buy us some followers.
Yeah. Got to be famous, of course.
I guess probably shouldn't give them free advertising.
But going back into trying to be famous here with getting the pick right offensively, the Bears 5th in runs per game, Hanwha almost dead last, 9th in runs per game. It's a tick better than the Kia Tigers, but not too good recently. Just 19 runs over their last 9 games. Pretty concerning for the Eagles offense. Taking a peek at the total here for the Deuce and Bears Hanwha Eagles game. It's a low one at 9. Is that right with these offenses?
Yeah, that's interesting. With 9, I don't think the Bears. I don't think the Eagles are going to contribute much to that total at all. I don't think Miranda gives up more than about 2. They're probably better than the Tigers in that they have some guys I occasionally recommend for fantasy purposes, but there's not a lot. Ryan Healy does have, I think, 5 hits in his last 3 games, but still pretty disappointing season overall. I do still love Yoonwon Jung, who somehow leads the league in walk rate despite not really hitting for power. Excited to see what he becomes. He's still quite young, I think 21, 22, so there's plenty of time for him to become an interesting player. But a leadoff guy who walks some, being your best hitter, is that's not going to get done against Ariel Miranda, especially since he's a lefty too. So I think with the Eagles not scoring much, it's just a question of can this reduced Bears offense get up to 7 or 8? And I'm gonna go with they can. I think Jong has been just that shaky, and I think there's enough still left on this Bears lineup. Again, clearly a reduced team, but Kyo Min-her, Jose Fernandez, couple big bats in there. So Guan Yang, their new first baseman they got from the Twins over the offseason. There's enough still there. 9 is a low over. Obviously, if Ariel Miranda throws a shutout, which he could do, they'd have to get all 10 themselves, but very, very clear Bears and pretty tight on the over, but I will slightly lean over.
Yeah, Bears are big favorites, and as Barry points out, the Eagles are struggling right now in the 9-game losing streak. Does not look like it's going to get much better tonight against one of the best pitchers in the KBO. Moving right along to game number 3, we got the Lotte Giants taking on the Kiwoom Heroes. This series is split right now. Lotte took game 1, Kiwoom took game 2, and these two pitchers have some major league experience. Ederson Franco going up against Jake Bringham. Starting with Franco, just about 30 innings pitched in June, an ERA just under 4, though. And when you factor in that he has some control issues, 8 hit batters in the month of June. Yes, half of those came in one start in the beginning of the month, but still, 8's a pretty high number for a starting pitcher that's supposed to be elite, that's supposed to be replacing Adrian Sampson, which wasn't crazy, but still should be a little better. Thoughts on Franco so far?
Yeah, he's clearly been one of the worst foreign starters in the league, which shouldn't really have come as a surprise. I don't know what his contract is, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Giants were going deliberately for a more inexpensive foreign arm than one that they thought was going to have a chance to be right up there with Dan Straley as a 1-2 punch. Just 5.1 career major league innings for Franco, which doesn't always say the most. I think Erik Jokic doesn't have much more than that, and he's had a long and successful career in the KBO, or relatively long, at least for a foreign player. But Franco also at the AAA level had a 5.97 ERA as a 26-year-old in 2019. So this is not somebody who you looked at and said, all he needs is an opportunity. He's clearly got something there. So it's not really surprising to me that he hasn't been that good. That said, he's better than his season-long numbers are. At least he has lately. You can divide his season neatly in half. He had a 5.91 ERA and a 1.53 WHIP in that first half, but a 4.02 ERA and a 1.14 WHIP in that second half. Last 7 starts. So if that's who he is going forward, a 4.02 ERA, 1.14 WHIP, that's a completely fine second foreign starter. Not a great one, but completely acceptable. But you can't just completely forget what he did early in the year, and it's not like that recent stretch is anything close to dominant. So I think best case scenario for Franco is he's fine, which is not exactly what you want out of one of your 2 foreign arms.
Yeah, it's definitely not what you'd like to compliment Dan Straley with, but the Lotte Giants will take it if they're going for the value option here. Switching over to the other pitcher here, Jake Bringham, for the Kiwoom Heroes, an ERA over 3.5 in the month of June. The long bombs kind of getting to him, those 6 home runs in those 5 June starts. Somewhat concerning. 2 hit batters in there too. I know he's had some arm troubles in the past. I'm assuming we're going to go that he's fully healthy now. But 22 strikeouts against 14 walks in that stretch isn't anything dominant.
Yeah, so Brigham last year at 3.62 ERA was quite good, but the Heroes did not bring him back initially, probably due to the elbow issues he battled at multiple points last year. He went to Taiwan and was just dominant at the lower level. I think ERA around 1 or something in a handful of starts. I don't have the exact number on the top of my head, but it was clearly the numbers of someone who was too good for the league they were pitching in. So they brought him back and got rid of Josh Smith after just a couple starts. Brigham showed up great with 2 scoreless outings in his first 2. But if you ignore those 2, which isn't entirely fair to him, but just to get a sense of how he's pitching this year, if you ignore those 2 starts, 4.46 ERA, 1.49 WHIP over his last 6. So that's quite mediocre. And even with those 2 good starts factored in, 18.2% strikeout rate is down about 3.5 percentage points from last year, and a 12.1% walk rate is up about 3.5 percentage points. So he has not been the Jake Brigham we saw last year, even with those 2 strong starts at the beginning of his time this year.
Nothing crazy. 2 kind of underperforming former MLBers pitching tonight in this one. In terms of the offenses, this one surprised me. Lotte's 3rd in runs per game. Kind of surprising for them to kind of be hanging around in that kind of stratosphere of KT Wiz, Deuce and Bears level offense. But they're still there. 13 runs in game 1 of this series. Kiwoom, they're middle of the pack. They're 6th. But they do have a good record, 8-2 in their last 10 games. What do we think about this finale for game 3 between these 2?
Yeah, the Giants have had this weird tendency to blow up for huge games. There's a 13 this week. There was a 9 and another 13 last week. The week before that, they had an 8 and a 9. They've had some really big numbers. They have an 18 and a 15 in the first week of June as well. So they have been known to go off at times. I don't think they're going to go off against Brigham. But they're an interesting lineup in that they don't really have a clear star, but they're pretty deep in above average bats. So they are capable of a big night at any time, especially now that Asap San is hitting again. He's a guy who is one of the best contact hitters every year, hit 295 or above for, I think, 11 straight years. Was not hitting well early in the season, but Asap San is now gone hitless just once in his last 16 games, is hitting 453 over that stretch. Not a ton other than contact there, but giving them just another big bat. If your team is built around, having a very deep lineup, you obviously want all those contributors pitching in. On the other side, Heroes, they sent down David Freitas again, continuing that theme we touched on earlier of just a lot of underperforming foreign hitters this year. Kind of surprised that they weren't one to replace him. He's either him or Preston Tucker. I could see leaving at any point. Not entirely sure why. They merely got a demotion. But also good depth with the Heroes. They run about 6 deep in guys that I'm comfortable playing any night, especially tonight against Anderson Franco, who's not scary at all. Jung-Hoo Lee, still way more doubles than homers. He's got like 8 or 9 more doubles than anybody else in the league, but hasn't been able to match his 15 homers from last year, has just 3. but the contact is still there. He's so good at the contact hitter that he can be among the league's best hitters, even with 3 homers. Plenty of other guys who are completely fine. Gunchang, so they've kept in the leadoff role, even though he was struggling early in the year, and he's been much better since he's been up in that role. So fairly deep lineups on both sides, I would say.
All right, that's what we're looking at in terms of the offenses here. Moving now into the picks for the Lotte Giants KBO Heroes game. Another total here at 9. Not often do we normally have the first 3 games that we talk about with such low totals, but Franco and Bringham, they have potential. At least they should have potential to shut out these teams. KBO, they are the favorites. Barry here with some analysis, some thoughts with those Lotte bats improving. Do we go over 9?
Yeah, it's a really tight one. I am going to go with the over. All it takes is one of them to have an off day. You got Franco, who was bad early and fine now, and you got Brigham, who was great early and pretty shaky now. I think one of those guys is going to have an off day. I think I would probably put this one pretty close to a 50-50. I'm going to slightly lean Heroes just on the raw pick. Although with those odds, I think I'd probably rather have the Giants at plus 140 than the Heroes at 180. But if we're just talking about who do we think is going to win, I do think that's the Heroes. I think given that both starters are somewhat unpredictable and both lineups are actually fairly similar, I think that I wouldn't call this much more than 55-45 in favor of the Heroes.
All right, slightly favoring KBO in this one. Moving on to the 4th game of the slate, we got the Samsung Lions against the SSG Landers. Landers 2-0-1 in this series. We had a doubleheader earlier and a tie in that doubleheader too in game 1. Landers, though, they are leading the series right now with that 2-0-1 record. Starting with the Samsung Lions starting pitcher Daewoo Kim. We have 2 Kims going against it, but Daewoo Kim for the Lions today, coming off a short outing, did not go long and doesn't go long in general. Just under 5 in his last 5 appearances. Not a big strikeout guy. Is this any sort of fantasy potential? Is this mainly just looked at as pretty much like a longer reliever potentially?
Yeah, that's pretty much what he is. Just 2 starts this year and wasn't good in relief. 5.68 ERA, 154 WHIP in relief. No reason to believe that's suddenly going to translate into a strong starter, and it has not. 5 runs in 8 innings as a starter, 4 strikeouts. Hasn't been getting lit up, but he's not somebody that they expect to look like much more than a 5th or 6th starter. He's a 32-year-old with a career 5.88 ERA, never posted an ERA better than 4.94 in a season. So he sticks around. He's can eat innings in that long relief role. And, of course, pitching at Daegu Samsung Lions Park will inflate his season-long ERAs. They're not there tonight. So maybe he's a little bit better than that career ERA suggests. But, even with that adjustment, this is not even a number 5 starter. He didn't enter the rotation until pretty recently. So very much a swingman type here. Just 11.8% strikeout rate on the season, which is actually up from 10.6% last year. So very much a pitch to contact, just hope he eats enough innings kind of guy.
Yeah, not looking too good there in that kind of opener swingman role for the Lions. The other Kim going tonight, Jong Bin Kim for the Landers. He had an outing where he had 70 pitches and only went 3 innings pitched. I mean, you look at that ERA, and is that just kind of like enough said, ERA near 10? Oh, what do we make of this Kim?
Yeah, that's pretty close to it. He's a 27-year-old who hadn't started a single KBO game before this year. Yeah, and it's not hard to see why, given his numbers. They're only turning to him because they're still without one foreign starter. Sam Gaviglio, who they picked up early in the month to replace Artie Lewicki, hasn't yet cleared protocols. I think the reports were saying it should be like 4 to 5 weeks since these guys were signed, which we're coming up on pretty soon. So we should have new guys to talk about within the next couple of weeks. With Gaviglio still not there, and then both Jung-Hoon Park and Sungwon Moon expected to be out for the year with elbow injuries. Massive hole in the Landers rotation, and nobody that they've used to fill it has been any good. It's remarkable that they're still 4th in the standings. They've gotten there through some good hitting because there's just not a lot in the rotation right now. Or I guess third in the standings, my bad. This is the 3-4 matchup with this Landers-Lions game. Kim, just nothing to like about Jung-Bin Kim. As a reliever last year, he had a 5.13 ERA, a 173 WHIP, and more walks than strikeouts. He's been a starter in all 4 of his appearances this season, has that ERA above 9, WHIP above 2. Does have 1 more strikeout than walk, though, so congrats to him on that. He spent much of the year in the Futures League and had an ERA north of 5 there, too. So there's just nothing at all on the track record here that suggests he's a KBO starting pitcher.
Indeed, I get that 1 more strikeout than walk. Can't quite say that walk ratio is a major concern when you got 1 more strikeout there. But we get some comments here that this could be a big over. Any concerns about the lineups not lighting up these guys? I mean, Samsung's 7th in runs scored. SSG is 4th, and they actually have 21 runs scored in the last 3. So they've been firing on all cylinders recently.
Yeah, we aren't at the league's most hitter-friendly park here in the Lions home park, but I still think, given the pitchers, we'll see plenty of runs, plenty of depth at the top of both lineups. Jose Perella is not an MVP favorite, given the performances of a few other guys like Yu Ji-young, Baeko Gong, but he's been absolutely everything the Lions could have asked for. On the other side, Jung Choi for the Landers, 2nd all-time in KBO home runs, and I think he's like 80 or 90 from the leader, but he's only 34. He's got plenty of time to finish 1st overall, and I think he should. He's showing no signs of slowing down at all. Leads the league in homers, Jung Choi. 20 homers, 15 of those in his last 39 games with a 12.31 OPS over that stretch. So he's hitting the ball as well as anybody for the last month, 6 weeks or so, whatever that would be, 6-7 weeks. Even though he's in his mid-30s, just absolutely no signs of slowing down at all. So we'd definitely be all over him against most starters, especially a guy like Daewoo Kim.
So we're looking at offensively, looking now at the line here for the Samsung Lions SSG Landers game. We finally have one that's not set at 9, the only one on the slate. That is total set at 11 runs with the Landers as the favorite. Where are we going to go?
Definitely over, even though that's high. 2 decent enough lineups, just nothing from either pitcher. And it's a close one here. Landers do have a better lineup, but they have a significantly worse pitcher, I think. Daewoo Kim is at least a KBO pitcher, even if that role is as a long man. I don't think Jung-Bin Kim looks like he is, so I am going to go Lions there, even though they're the underdog. I think it's pretty close. Once you're talking about pitchers this shaky, they both could give up 4 runs in 2 innings and be out of there. So if you like the Landers bat slightly more, by all means, pick Landers. But I think I'm even more pessimistic about Jung-Bin Kim, so it's enough to push it to the Lions for me.
Going with the underdog upset pick. I like it, Eric. I think one of the few times you're willing to go with the plus money there, but we're liking the Lions there and that matchup. Moving over to the final game on the slate. The other matchup of the close players in the standings in the 3-4, we now have the 1-2 matchup with the KT Wiz and the LG Twins here. Jasong Bay going up for the Wiz. Wiz won game 1 in a 1-run game, 4-3. And Bay, 3 straight outings of 3 earned runs, 19 strikeouts in 17 innings. Pitch isn't great, but any chance we're warming up on Bay? I like him. Any chance you're starting to warm up to him with those recent outings?
Yeah, there's a whole lot more reason to like Bay than last year, even though he's improved his ERA by 0.02 points. I think really he's emblematic of the reason why really both of these teams are at the top of the standings, and that's rotation depth. I mean, a lot of teams can have 1 or 2 good foreign starters, maybe 1 good local arm, but the back of both of these rotations, you talk about Bay, Young Pyo Ko, and Hyunjun So for the Wiz, all completely acceptable starters. I think that's the best trio of Korean starters in the league. And then on the other side, guys like him, if he is better than his season has been, Minho Lee, Chen Hung Jung, Wuchan Cha, some combination of those guys for the Twins makes up a very solid back of that rotation as well. So even though these are not close to the best starters on these teams, they're still completely solid arms. Bae, like I mentioned, he's more or less the same ERA as last year, but his strikeout rate has shot up by over 9 points, while his walk rate has only gone up 1 point. Last year, that ERA looked like a complete mirage. This year, it looks well-earned, which makes him a completely fine mid-rotation guy, and with a bit of fantasy upside given those strikeouts. Still a fairly high whip at 145, which is, again, almost a match for his 146 from last year, because he does walk too many guys. But I think he's a legitimate mid-rotation starter this season. Not in his best form either, 5.54 ERA in June. So I wouldn't be treating him as close to a shutdown arm, but I think he is a completely fine member of that rotation, which I did not think heading into the year.
That's what we're looking at with Bae. I'm not sure if you could say fine with the other starter here with Im for the Twins. A little unusual, a little wacky numbers in terms of his game log. He was struggled in the opening of his debut for this season against Hanwha Kiwoom, a 21 ERA and 4 innings pitched, some bad stuff. But then shut down the Landers earlier, this month, back in June 22nd, a little while ago. 7 innings pitched, 4 strikeouts, 4 walks isn't great, but only 1 earned run, 2 total hits in 7 innings pitched. Did they do a body swap here? Is this a different guy than those first 2 outings in April? What's going on here with Chan-Ki Im?
Yeah, Chen-Ki Im, I mean, he should be fine. Last year, he was fine. Last year, at a 4.08 ERA, 141 whip, struck out just over 21% of opposing batters. Completely solid number 3-4 type. Just 2 disasters to start this year, as you mentioned. But he went to the Futures League, and he looked like he was totally fine. A 1.78 ERA in 6 appearances at the Futures League level. That tells me he's fine. That's the way that an established veteran should be dominating Futures League competition. And Im is that established veteran. Doesn't have a great track record, 4.96 career ERA, although, again, a lot of that career was spent during the Juice Ball era. He's never had an ERA lower than that 4.08 last year. So expecting him to be much more than an acceptable back-end starter is probably too much, but he really should be that guy. 1 run on 2 hits in his last start, even with the 4 walks against 4 strikeouts. It was enough of a convincing outing that I'm more or less back to treating him as a fine back-end starter again. Would like to see 1 more before I'm totally confident, just given how awful those early outings were. But I think it wouldn't surprise me at all if Im has an ERA in the low 4s the rest of the way.
And that's what we're projecting for the full season there. Again, ERA just about a little tick over 4.5, 4.8. Let's see what actually turns out to be. That is the 2 starting pitchers. In terms of the offense, KT, second. They're doing it. Mel Rojas Jr. isn't there. Becco Gong filling in. Jared Hoying on the way should provide some of that hustle that Almonte did not have and kind of ride the high that this Wiz team is feeling right now. The Twins, they don't really score all that much, 8th in runs per game on the year. But before their loss yesterday, they had run marks of 9, 7, 10, and 5. So maybe they're trending in the right way. Bae isn't an amazing matchup, but still maybe exploitable. Anyone in particular you're looking at in these lineups?
Yeah, neither pitcher is good enough that I would hard avoid the lineups. Becco Gong, obviously outstanding for the Wiz, has his batting average, I believe, back up over 400. He's been bouncing over and under for a while. It would be quite fun if he could end up there. Still not elite power. 9 homers is just about half the league leaders, but it's enough. When you make as much contact as he does, it's enough to even put you in the MVP conversation, I would think. On the other side, part of the reason the Twins are so low in runs scored is they do play in the league's most pitcher-friendly park, which is where the game is taking place tonight at Gemsel Baseball Stadium. But they also got nothing from their foreign hitter slot, same as the Wiz. Roberto Ramos, as we talked about, is gone after being bad and then injured. There's enough decent bats, so Chen-Ki Hong has developed into quite an impressive leadoff man. Really didn't play much at all prior to last season. but elite walk rate, good contact as well. One of the best on-base percentages in the league. Sets the table well for guys like Hyun-Soo Kim, Yoon-Sung Chae. Hyung-Jung Lee has also shown something after homering, hit a bunch of homers in just about half a season last year. I think it was 16 in 82 games or something like that for Hyun-Jung Lee. Hasn't had the best year overall, but there were a decent number of bats for the Twins that underperformed early. So if enough of them get things back and they can just creep up towards the middle of the pack, in terms of runs scored, when you get that strong bullpen and the deep rotation, I think there's a reason why these two teams are at the top of the standings. I don't think it's a stretch to call them the two best teams in the league. I think it's these two and the Dinos. The Dinos just being so lopsided, you got to give them the respect after last year, given that their lineup's still that good. Pitching staff is shaky, so they're much more one-dimensional compared to two more well-rounded teams here. But again, I don't think it's at all a surprise that these two teams are top of the standings, even without getting much from their foreign bats.
Yes, I think we'll let the Twins have some fun, moving in the rest of the summer. But when I think it comes time to playoff baseball, I think we know who the real clutch team is with the Dinos there. But
and also you get to ignore the back end of that rotation, which
of course
is one of the strengths of these two teams and the biggest weakness of the Dinos. So that gap does shrink when you get to the postseason.
Indeed, was throwing Rosinski out there every single start. We'll see what happens.
Didn't they do that in the playoffs? It was Raczynski, wasn't it, that had the really long relief appearance? He pulled a Bumgarner, basically.
Yeah,
if I'm remembering right.
He's just that clutch. He's that good, and that's what the Dinos can do. But anyway, back to this one: the KT Wiz LG Twins total hit set here at 9 runs, like most of these other games on the slate, with the favorite as the Wiz with Bay pitching. We had a couple underdog picks in the past. Can we see an underdog pick today? What are you liking here for this Wiz Twins matchup?
Yeah, this really is a great game. I mean, two probably good but not completely reliable pitchers against two lineups that should be pretty good, even given that the Twins haven't scored a lot this year. I'm going to go with the under, in part because of that park. Obviously, with two somewhat shaky pitchers, all it takes is one for them to blow up. But I'm going to expect that we'll see a 5-3, 4-3 kind of game here. And I'm going to give the slight edge to the Wiz. I think that lineup has been better, and Im has only had one good start this year. If you want to say Jisung Bae has been on a slight slump, and I'm buying fully into that last good start by the Twins and also that bullpen, as Barry mentioned there. I think there's a reason why the odds are quite close to a push on this one. I don't think I would think you're dumb at all if you pick the Twins here.
All right, looking at the under 9 and the KT Wiz and the Wiz LG Twins matchup. And that is all 5 games broken down here. Starting pitchers, offense. We got you covered here. Check out the site rotowire.com/free KBO for the full lineups. Check out all the players. Check out all the stats. There's some great resources here. And as always, on Twitter at RotowireKBO. Before we go, we leave with your top 3 picks from the entire slate here, a total or a team. Erik, where are we going? Top 3 picks from the entire board.
Yeah, it's tougher to pick than normal. I mean, clearly Bears over Eagles, just massive mismatch in the pitchers there. But the other ones, the pitchers and hitters are all fairly close. And I'm not sure I feel confident picking the Dinos as one of the top 3, given how good Aaron Brooks can be. So that makes things pretty tight, though. They may still get in there anyway. I do think I'm going to go with that Lions-Landers over. I think that's a correct call. They should be one of the top 3. 2 very shaky pitchers there. I think that one's pretty close to a push in terms of who wins, though. So we'll call that the second one. It's a pretty big drop, I think, in terms of going down to whatever I'm third most confident about. It might just be the Dinos, I guess, just by default, just because the other ones are all really quite close. I don't love picking against Aaron Brooks with that level of confidence. But again, look at the gap in the 2 lineups. We're talking about, 5.77 runs per game for the Dinos, 3.74. So just over 2 runs per game more for the Dinos. That's enough of a gap that on this very tight day, I will elevate to number 3, which I guess means I'm exactly in agreement with Barry here.
Just flipping that order of the 2-3 pick and pretty much on the money there. Joshua with the pick seems like a no-brainer with the Bears. In agreement there.
Yep. That's, I mean, the odds say that too, so you're not going to get a crazy payout there at all, but it's a massive gap.
Yep, going with the Bears as the first pick. The over 11 runs in that Samsung Lions SSG Landers game. And the Dinos, again, the Dinos pick is more of a little toss-up compared to the other ones, but it's tough to go against Brooks, but you got to do it when you look at those lineups. Kia, again, dead last in runs per game in the entire KBO on that losing streak. Not looking good for them right now. All right, that's all we got for you guys. Thank you for tuning in. We will let you know on the day. Should be back to normal next week. Follow at Rotowire KBO for all the latest updates. Thank you guys for tuning in.
Yeah, thanks everybody.